Tonight on Reporting Scotland, a profession at breaking point. That's the warning from nurses as figures show a record number of vacancies.
People are becoming exhausted, doing extra shifts, doing extra hours. It becomes a time you think, is the goodwill going to continue?
Also coming up on the programme, parents are told they have no legal right to withdraw their children from controversial Primary 1 tests. The Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry announces it'll investigate residential care institutions run by male religious orders. Scotland's World Cup women return home after their qualification triumph. We speak to the next generation of players hoping to follow in their heroes' footsteps. Good evening. Record levels of nursing vacancies have led to warnings of a profession at breaking point. The Royal College of Nursing is campaigning for tougher legislation to ensure there are enough nurses to deliver safe care. It comes at a time when a shortage of doctors and other NHS staff has led to the closure of wards and suspension of some services at hospitals across the country. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
Last month, nursing shortages led to dementia wards in Aberdeen having to close. There were not enough staff to guarantee a safe service for patients. This week's figures show nursing and midwifery vacancies across Scotland at a record high. 1 in 20 posts are unfilled. That amounts to over 3,300 nurses or midwives. The view from nursing representatives on the front line is it's becoming increasingly difficult to fill the gaps.
At times when you've got good staffing levels, there's nobody off sick, the morale's good. But I think in general, people are becoming exhausted, doing extra shifts, doing extra hours. It becomes a time you think, is the goodwill going to continue?
The government is bringing in legislation it says will ensure adequate staffing levels to keep patients safe. But the RCN say there's no legal sanction and no provision for surges in demand.
There is a risk that it will only measure staffing levels once a year. That will not take into account an increase in admissions due to an increase in demand by older people, or an increase in admissions to A&E, or actually changes to staffing as a result of early retirement and shortages. That will not take that into account.
He does have a pulse, but his breathing's quite
There
shallow,
are
so
more nurses now in training, and the number of qualified nurses has gone up over the last decade. But so too has demand. Glasgow Caledonian University is one of the biggest nursing schools in Scotland.
The Scottish Government are looking for an increase in numbers. They'll ask us to do that, and so far we've always managed to achieve that. So our numbers have gone up consistently year on year and seem to continue, will continue to do so.
So I'm just going to have another wee listen.
Students like Esther look forward to a long career in a rewarding profession.
Basically all my life I've always wanted to help people, and this just seemed like the best route to go down that, to help people, to make people better, to improve their lives.
The government is facing challenges with recruitment. This week we also learn about an increase in physio and occupational therapy vacancies and in long-term unfilled consultant posts. But while they look for solutions in there, those on the front line worry about the impact on patients. Lisa Summers, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
The Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry has announced it's to investigate a number of residential care establishments run by male religious orders. The hearings, scheduled for next summer, will include evidence of alleged abuse at the Fort Augustus Abbey School, which was revealed by a BBC Scotland investigation. Katie Hunter reports.
It was one of the most prestigious Catholic boarding schools in the country. But now Fort Augustus Abbey in the Highlands is one of a number of residential establishments facing investigation by the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry. It was run by the Order of Benedictines, along with Carl Kemp in North Berwick. St Ninians in Falkland, Fife, run by the Christian Brothers, will also be investigated, along with the Maris Brothers establishments in Dumfries and Largs. The Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry's chair, Lady Smith, is calling for any victims to come forward, regardless of whether they've already spoken to the police. In a statement, she said, "I am well aware that it can be difficult and very emotional to talk about experiences in care, and I want to take this opportunity to give an assurance that we have a dedicated witness support team here, who will help and support anyone providing evidence to us. In 2013, a BBC documentary aired allegations against a dozen Benedictine monks at Fort Augustus Abbey School, prompting a major police investigation and subsequent inquiries. David Walls attended Carl Kemp, also run by the Order of Benedictines, in the late 1950s. He's pleased his former school will be included in the inquiry.
It's long overdue and I welcome it. Hopefully, as a result of the inquiry, we'll get some truth and some admission of responsibility and hopefully an apology.
Hearings into these residential care establishments will begin next summer. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
Parents have no legal right to withdraw their children from controversial Primary 1 assessments, according to fresh official guidance. Councils have been sent the advice confirming that decisions on whether children should take part are up to schools and teachers. Campaigners have been calling on parents to ask schools not to put their children through the tests. Opposition parties want them scrapped. Here's our education correspondent, Jamie McIver.
Primary 1 is about learning through play. And at some point over the next year, these youngsters will have their literacy and numeracy assessed. If a parent's worried, they can speak to their child's school. But at Holyrood today, the Education Secretary made it clear parents have no legal right to actually withdraw their children from the scheme.
The position on standardised assessments is the same as it is on literacy and numeracy. There is no explicit statutory mention requiring a school to teach them, and never have had in Scotland. But the idea this means schools are not required to teach pupils to read and write is patently ridiculous. The same is true of standardised assessments.
The fresh guidance was sent to councils this week. It makes it clear it isn't compulsory for every single child to take part, but also that there cannot be a legal right for parents to withdraw their children. Some opponents argue parents do have an opt-out and produced these postcards for parents to send to schools. But regardless of the legal position, all the opposition parties at Holyrood think the tests should go.
The Education Secretary clearly missed the lesson in stopping digging when in a hole. Faced with evidence of stress on 4- and 5-year-olds caused by these tests, testimony from teachers that they are time-consuming and of little educational worth, and a campaign by parents to boycott them, he carries on regardless.
Will the Scottish Government just cut its losses and scrap the testing of these Primary 1 children?
I must say I profoundly disagree with the contention that testing 5-year-old boys and girls is consistent with play-based learning.
The political row is intense. The Conservatives highlighted earlier guidance sent by a senior civil servant with misleading legal advice.
Last week, a letter was sent out to local authority directors of education from the Scottish Government's Deputy Director, Graham Logan, and it stated that the Scottish Government had taken legal advice from the local authority's legal body SOLAR with regards to the rights of parents to withdraw their children from Primary 1 tests. SOLAR, however, refuted that they had provided any such legal advice, and we learnt this morning at the Education Committee that the Scottish Government admits that it had been wrong to imply that any legal advice of this nature had been taken.
Some changes have already been made to the assessments, but the scheme isn't facing the axe. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
Talks to resolve the row over scallop fishing rights in the English Channel ended a short time ago in London. Now, last week there were violent clashes when up to 40 French vessels surrounded a small number of British boats. Rocks and smoke bombs were thrown, and video footage appeared to show a Peterhead registered scallop dredger colliding with the French boats. Well, Rachel Bell is in Peterhead for us tonight. Rachel, what's the latest?
Well, it appears that finding a solution to the scallop wars in the English Channel takes a bit longer than you might expect. The talks started at 2 o'clock today in London. They involved UK and French officials, French fishing leaders, and they were expected to last anywhere between 2 and 3 hours. But it's only in the past half hour that we actually heard that a provisional agreement has been reached. So let me tell you about what we know. We know that an agreement has been provisionally reached which would see larger boats, so those over 15 metres, they would face the same restrictions as the French boats. In terms of the smaller boats, those under 15 metres, well, further discussions will have to take place to see what compensation they will get for staying out of the bay. Now, let me just remind you about how we got here. Last week, tensions flared off the Normandy coast in the Bay of Seine between UK and French fishermen. A small number of British boats were surrounded by around 40 French vessels. Now, rocks and smoke bombs were thrown. There was a collision involving a Peterhead registered scallop dredger called the Honeyborn 3, and tensions were indeed flared. Now, the focus of today's talks was all about trying to find a peaceful resolution to this. Now, the deal's not signed and sealed. There will be further discussions which will take place in Paris on Friday, and that will be to try and find out more about what compensation will be given for those smaller boats. At that point, the deal will finally be sealed, but full details of the agreement are still emerging. But what we do know is that for the time being there will be calmer waters in the English Channel.
Thank you very much, Rachel Bell there. An independent inquiry into NHS Tayside's mental health services has launched with an appeal for personal testimonies. It's looking for anyone who's engaged with mental health services in the region to share their experiences. Patients, families, carers, NHS staff and community groups have all been asked to come forward. The SNP leader at Westminster has described the UK government's Brexit plan as dead as a dodo. At Prime Minister's questions this afternoon, Ian Blackford said Scotland should remain in the customs union and single market to protect jobs. Theresa May accused the SNP of wanting to break up the UK. Here's our correspondent Nick Eardley.
It's still the issue dominating politics as MPs get back to work after the summer break. Views on Brexit still vary wildly.
But those big decisions will have to be made, and soon. And as deadlines loom, there are constant reminders of the divisions both outside Parliament and inside.
The Prime Minister shows little sign of backing down from her plan. The Chequers proposal she regards as a compromise and the only workable show in town. But others aren't convinced.
Prime Minister, your Chequers plan is as dead as a dodo. With the clock ticking down, will the Prime Minister now finally concede that backing the single market and customs union is the only option?
Labour leader thinks there's been too much focus on government division and there needs to be a rethink.
When will we get proposals that put jobs and the economy ahead of the survival of herself and her own government?
The Prime Minister is facing pressure from all sides. Those who think her offer goes too far, others who say it's not far enough. But for now at least, she's not budging.
We have put forward a proposal under the Chequers plan that protects jobs, that protects livelihoods, that ensures that we deliver on the vote of the British people, that ensures that we deliver on no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and maintain the union of the United Kingdom.
How long that position lasts, though, will have a lot to do with those in her own party. Brexiteers want her to be more open to leaving without a deal.
The first priority of every department must be domestic preparedness, whether we leave the EU with a deal or without.
Yeah. Yet there are others in her party who have much more confidence.
A lot of people will be looking at the Conservative Party and thinking, why have you not just agreed on something yet?
Well, I think obviously there's long-standing views in relation to Europe within the Conservative Party. I think the Prime Minister has set up a pragmatic, sensible compromise. I really do have every confidence that over the next few weeks we're going to land a good deal for the United Kingdom.
For some, that's wildly optimistic. The next few months should give us some clarity.
Well, let's go now to Nick live. Nick, on another matter, the SNP's leader at Westminster has been talking about Russia.
Yes, and specifically about the Russian broadcaster RT. Now, RT has been controversial for some time because of its links to the Russian government. Alex Salmond, of course, has a programme on the outlet. It's produced by the former SNP MP Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh. Now, the party has always said that's a matter for Mr Salmond and Ms Ahmed Sheikh, but that it wouldn't encourage people to go on RT. Ian Blackford today, however, launching his strongest attack on the channel so far after being asked about Mr Salmond's programme. Let me read to you the exact words he used at a briefing with journalists this afternoon. "I think RT is a vehicle of the Russian state," he said. "What we now know today is it's clear that the Russian state was demonstrably implicated in the attack on the Skripals in Salisbury. This is a defining moment in some respects." He went on to add, "I do not believe that people should broadcast on RT. We have approached RT for a comment. We've not heard back from them yet. For his part, Mr Salmond has always insisted he has full editorial control when it comes to his show. More broadly, the SNP have been saying today that it's important that there's a united front in response to the government's belief that Russian intelligence was behind the poisonings in Salisbury. The Prime Minister says that the full range of tools from across the national security apparatus will be used to counter the threat.
Thank you very much, Nick. Well, staying with Westminster, the number of Scottish MPs is set to be cut by around 10% under wider proposals to reduce the size of the House of Commons. The Boundary Commission for Scotland has submitted its final recommendations for Westminster constituencies. The UK Parliament decided to reduce the number of constituencies from 650 to 600, meaning a drop from 59 to 53 in Scotland. It's coming up to 6:45 and a reminder of tonight's main story. A profession at breaking point, that's the warning from nurses, as figures show a record number of vacancies. And still to come, we take a look at what the national team reaching the World Cup might mean for women's football here. Back to Brexit now, and it was the focus of a protest at the Scottish Parliament with a call for Scotland to have a formal role in trade negotiations after we leave the EU. Well, on a visit here, the UK Trade Minister pointed out it was Westminster's responsibility, but said he did want Holyrood to have a say. Our political correspondent Andrew Kerr has more.
More dodgy deals!
Angry birds and fat cats tussle outside Holyrood over the new trade bill. There's a meaning behind the colourful message. These demonstrators want Scotland to have a say in post-Brexit trade negotiations, and they're worried about bad deals, bringing in such things as chlorinated chicken from the US and threats to the NHS.
Let's give our members of Parliament in Westminster and here in Scotland a voice on this. Let's let them look at what those trade deals might contain and work together to make good trade deals that work for the whole of the UK and that don't threaten our public services or mean chlorine chicken on the shelves.
There may be a tug of war outside Parliament, but inside the building, the Trade Minister was trying to reassure the MSPs.
George Hollingbury was giving evidence to a committee, saying he wanted to tackle what he called misinformation about food standards and environmental threats. And he told us that he did want Holyrood to have a role in negotiations.
This is an area where the UK government holds responsibility. And so it is actually for the Westminster Parliament to make up its minds about this. But despite that, I'm absolutely clear that the Scottish Government should have a role in this process. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about a formal role that is defined in statute and so on and so forth.
Not a formal role, and that's the problem for the Scottish Government, as they say Scotland's interests won't be represented. So there's a call for a change to the current settlement.
I think everybody would accept that the weight of Brexit is too great for the current devolved settlement to bear. That's obvious. That's what's happened in the last 2 years. And no matter what position you took on it, the system has not worked. And therefore there needs to be changes to the system.
Brexit continues to strain the current constitutional setup. There's a lot more heave-ho to go before things settle down. Andrew Kerr, reporting Scotland, Holyrood.
Some sport now. And Scotland's women can inspire a generation to footballing success. So says the head of performance at the SFA. The squad flew to Scotland earlier after qualifying for next year's World Cup in France. They booked their place in the competition for the first time following a 2-1 win over Albania. Here's our senior football reporter, Chris McLaughlin.
The welcome home was fairly small scale, the size of the smiles perhaps the true reflection of an achievement that could take a while to sink in.
Do you know, I don't think it will for a wee while to come, certainly for myself personally anyway, but you know, the players are obviously delighted. It's been a long journey home, so you know, they'll be desperate to get home to their families and spend time with their families celebrating now, I would imagine.
They keep having some pictures.
And when the pinching stops, they can reflect and look ahead. This was Kim Little's opening goal against Albania that helped seal the deal. This is the prize. France 2019. Next June, 24 of the world's best teams doing battle across 9 cities. Scotland will be at the party for the very first time.
To take us there, having had such an incredible campaign, it's fantastic for the national side, but it's also wonderful for girls and women's football in general.
And that is the hope that success leads to interest and greater participation, ultimately growing the women's game.
To end up with 21 points and top the group in the way she's done it and the way the group have done it is sensational for us. It really is, and it's a big up for the women's game, and more so for the inspiration for young girls coming through now in the pathway.
Women's football is one of the fastest growing sports in the country. In 2013, 6,500 players were registered. Today, that figure has pretty much doubled. Heroes of Hampden plastered across the National Stadium, 100 foot high. Dalglish here, further round, Law and Miller. Reminders to those who come here of Scotland's proud footballing past. But how long until they're joined by a Little, by a Cuthbert or by a Ross? Heroes for a new generation, with women leading the way. Chris McLaughlin reporting Scotland, Hampden Park.
Well, that victory inspired many congratulations on social media last night. Aileen Clark has been getting reaction from the team's supporters across the country.
If you want to know what pure joy looks like, well, these post-match celebrations must come close. And that excitement has rippled all the way from Albania to football pitches around Scotland, like here in Granton-on-Spey.
So good for women's football. It's so good for women's sport to see how much a good reception they've had as well. For the girls, especially in the school, it's been a lot of talk about it today especially, so it's quite good for them to see.
It means a lot to me because it's so cool, and I think it's just going to inspire a lot more girls to pick up football.
I will be following it intently, yeah, 100%.
Do you think we can go all the way?
Hopefully. Got my fingers crossed.
I was absolutely delighted. Congratulations to them. They have worked incredibly hard and they deserve this success entirely. I'm patron of the women's football team, so it's a particular pleasure to see them get so much success and, dare I say it, to see them do what the men's team have been unable to do now for a very, very long time.
#OurGirls, is one you'll be seeing a lot of on social media. It's been full of congratulations and praise for the Scottish national women's team. For the players' families, it's been emotional. Jen Beattie played her role in defence to the full, but for parts of the match, her dad, rugby legend John, couldn't watch, and he's still finding it hard today to properly sum up his pride.
So we have the Scottish team that's a one-off, first generation of really fit young women, desperate to win, trying to prove that there's something that should be respected. And I've watched Jenny be that girl from probably 10, and then they do it, and it's unbelievable. It's I'm away.
Pure elation, emotion, wow, and I was just so happy for the girls. I just felt so chuffed for them.
Scotland captain Rachel Corsie comes from Aberdeen. The team's achievement is particularly welcomed at her former club.
It's great that Scotland are through, but the fact that it's been led by a local Aberdonian is just tenfold. I think it just adds to it for the girls up here. And Rachel really participates when she comes home. Sometimes it's really short. She gets some time with her family, but she's always giving back and with coaching.
The question for the team now is, when is the World Cup single coming out? Come on, ladies, you know you want to. Aileen Clark, reporting Scotland.
No, for those of us who remember Ali's Tartan Army and all that. And more good news, Scotland has a new shooting world champion. Shona McIntosh is the first female in GB history to win the 50-metre prone title. The 22-year-old from Dollar produced a perfect final shot to win the World Championship in South Korea. The gold adds to the GB team bronze medal she collected earlier this week alongside her elder sister Jen McIntosh and England's Zoe Bruce. Well, now let's get the weather from Jude.
There's hope for us yet, Jackie.
Very good evening to you. Actually, it turned out to be a pretty nice day across much of Scotland with some lovely blue skies across parts of the east. I can see here behind me. We do have a weather front that was across more western areas. Here it is here earlier on. It will continue to journey across the country tonight. We're seeing that at the moment. It's actually clear of the Western Isles. It's brightening up here nicely. The cloud and rain pushing eastwards fairly swiftly, becoming confined to Shetland overnight. Then dry for most of Scotland overnight with lengthy clear spells. Quite chilly in rural parts. We could see a touch of frost. We're typically around about 6 or 7 Celsius, and by the end of the night we'll start to see some showers pushing into the northwest, maybe the odd mist or fog patch developing by tomorrow morning. So a predominantly dry start, a chilly start, a bright start, good sunny spells, but those showers across the northwest will start to make their presence felt. So by the time we reach the afternoon, it'll be scattered showers for southern Scotland, but bear in mind they are showers, and especially in the south we will see some sunshine coming through, but with the air mass coming in from the northwest it will be a cool feel to the day. And those showers probably more widespread across the north, maybe prolonged at times, actually possibly thundery as well, maybe a bit fiercer than they will be further south. We'll start to see the cloud lifting from Shetland later in the day, the legacy of that overnight rain. So into the latter part of the afternoon, we'll see those showers starting to decrease. Something drier coming in from the north, so it will end up being a predominantly dry night. Now, let's have a wee look at the pressure chart. It's really very interesting because we have this developing area of low pressure out to the North Sea on Friday. That's something we don't see too often. Elsewhere, it will be dry, but that low will bring really quite persistent and heavy rain for eastern Scotland as things stand at the moment and over the Northern Isles. But in the west, it will be drier the further away from the low that you are. And we should see something brighter for the likes of the Inner Hebrides, Kintyre, down towards the southwest. And actually, with the air coming around the low from the continent, you'll notice it will feel that wee bit warmer, if you like. We could see 17 Celsius for Shetland. And that's your forecast. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Judith. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. 2 Russian military intelligence officers have been accused of carrying out the Novichok attacks in Salisbury. Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Boshirov have been named as the suspects in the attempted murder of the former Russian spy Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia. And record levels of nursing vacancies have led to warnings of a profession at breaking point. The Royal College of Nursing is campaigning for tougher legislation to ensure there are enough nurses to deliver safe care. And that is Reporting Scotland. I'll be back with an update in our late bulletin at 10:30. Until then, from all the team, have a good evening. Bye-bye.